Morning, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Obviously, not our normal day of getting on air, and things are going to probably change up again. And because I am currently in my PhD program, and a lot of things are changing and shifting. Um, so maybe I'll do I know I get these things in my head. I'm not gonna commit to it 100%, but maybe I'll do kind of a little journeying on the Women of Consciousness Facebook about what's going on with my PhD and sharing information and consciousness studies and um, that way people kind of understand. How so also you can follow us on if you go to womenofconsciousness.com, you will find us on Facebook. We are trying to get the Instagram up and running, but also Women of Consciousness on Instagram or at Women of Consciousness on Instagram. You can find us. And we have a couple of things coming up in September, two goddess circles, one goddess retreat, which we'll be doing a virtual retreat for individuals. And we hope to see you at either one of those. You can go to Eventbrite and look up Women of Consciousness. And we have our events coming up, I believe, September 20. Remind me, Pam, because you were the one who knows the dates.
The 20th is the monthly normal goddess circle, and then the virtual retreat is the following week, the 27th.
The 27th. So the 20th and the 27th. So we hope that you can join us. We're very excited about that. So today, what are we talking about? Well, I mean, again, we always kind of just we talk about what's on our hearts and in our minds. And a lot of the dialogue we've been having is around, the warrior archetype, which I think it's timely. I think it's important. I think that as a collective consciousness that individuals are I believe we all embody some part of the warrior spirit, and we have to because obviously we wouldn't be alive, right? We are constantly going through these patterns of suffering where we have to emerge out of them. Some people can't take it, and so there's other ways that people can't take it, and eventually, you know, um, the shadow side shows up, and sometimes people exit their life prematurely on their own because they can't handle the suffering. But for those that are here and still here and going through it, they're exercising some form of the warrior archetype. And, at what level it depends. And I think, we're kind of just talking about that. And maybe there's a distinction between the the archetype of the warrior where there's the obviously the external physical part, but then there's also this internal part that occurs where it's like the soul is going through some sort of battle. And I personally believe that, we are in a spiritual battle at this point in history. I think we still do have physical war, obviously, that manifests, and warriors that are going out there and sacrificing themselves for ideas. Well, to say for ideas, right? Territory too, I guess, could be another piece of it, but mostly it's the ideals or the for their culture, for what they think is right. And so there's like these different aspects that sort of emerge, I believe, in the archetype of the warrior. And the spiritual one, and then I believe that we're going through that more is because with the physical war that's going on, I think we as a human species understand that we've kind of taken it too far with the weapons that we have available to us to cause destruction. It's not just a war of let's go and, grab a sword, or before it was even, I don't know, rocks. Who knows how they were fighting, right? It could be guerrilla warfare, that they were doing in the past to, this more, I don't know, I don't want to say sophisticated, but, they were doing all these different types of warfare. And then it expanded, of course, once ammunition came in and guns came in and all that kind of stuff. So we're at a place where the physical warfare is like a nuclear bomb, which can then just harm humanity in ways that are, I mean, it can ruin entire civilization basically. And so for us, I think because we know that, we sort of, I feel like I feel like these men, and I'm gonna say men because they're the ones who are really actually calling the shots. I'm not saying women don't join these militaries and stuff like that, but it's mostly men. And I think they realize that if they hit a button, that it could totally destroy them as well. So we're at that point, and I think because of that, in some sense, we now are battling for our souls. And so I think there's this like inner outer experience of the archetype of the warrior, and the internal being sort of this battle that, the human experience or human condition, that as these challenges emerge, that we are battling within ourself, these, I don't want to call them demons, but these shadow aspects of ourself, and trying to sever or cut through or transmute, transform, whatever you want to call it, into something that is meaningful, or into peace, or into what I would say eventually the liberated warrior, which if you read the gene keys, they talk about the liberated warrior, which that's where I'm kind of like, yeah, I resonate with that a lot. So in the battle of the spiritual realm, we see that there's certain individuals that show up as, I would call them, some of them parasites, right? That show up to suck the life force out of you. And a lot of the battle is setting boundaries, or placing boundaries for yourself, which to me shows up as, the sword, right? The sword of like cutting ties with people, or communicating what you need, and communicating your boundaries, which again goes into tarot. So if we're talking about archetypal stuff, it's not just the warrior itself, right? You can look at the queen of swords, and I always, those are the two major ones that I always talk about, is the Queen of Swords and the King of Swords, where you have a very unique pattern. The Queen of Swords, in her shadow aspect, is not very fun to deal with. Um, you know, so it's kind of looking at the tools that we have in sort of this spiritual realm, if you will, or the archetypes, or however you want to call it, within the soul. What is it that we have? What tools do we have to support us through our internal battle? And as a warrior internally, how do you either sever things from within, or actually transmute and transform things, and shed the old into the new? So there's all these aspects to it. And I think for me, I'm at a place where I'm starting to find peace and harmony within my own self. Like the battle doesn't have to be so chaotic as it was in the past. And part of that is like regulating nervous system, so we can put it back into the physical of the experience of war is like heightened anxiety, PTSD. Chronic PTSD would be kind of the residual from going to battle. And then we would say that, how do we regulate the nervous system so that we're experiencing peace, right? If you could see that PTSD was a result of these people going to war, and coming back from battle. Now we have chronic PTSD from individuals who are experiencing physiological, internally, the same type of experience, and not being at war, but they are. They're at war with themselves. And they're at and so there is this kind of, I don't know if dichotomy is the right word, right? This kind of split of internal, external warfare, and and how that's being operated. So, from an archetypal perspective, you can look at these different energies, that can help you maybe battle the internal war, or things that emerge within us. And how do we use that energy to, I think, find harmony and liberation within? Like, that's where I'm headed,
Definitely.
I need to be liberated, and come to that peace. So, that's kind of like what I have to say. What do you think? Tell me what your thoughts are, in terms of the warrior archetypes, or
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you said. It I feel like when I reflect on my own experiences, like what you're saying about this spiritual kind of war, and I think right, like as a kid, that definitely taught that through the Bible. that
Mhm,
that right, there's this kind of like good versus bad that's taking place, and
mhm, mhm.
we're just, I don't know, collateral damage in the process
Yeah,
of that or
yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
fighting
yeah,
for our souls between the devil or Jesus.
yeah.
Um, so clearly, I mean, no matter how distorted that myth or whatever got, like that archetypal, there's obviously something about the light and the dark being at opposites.
Mhm.
And yet we know there's also a unity and an integration and a oneness that they like separate out of. Um, so I think it's complex. I don't think we'll ever fully wrap our heads around it because it's beyond the human, concept and imagination. But when we start to reflect internally and then start paying attention externally, I can definitely relate. Whether it was situations with other people where it felt like a spiritual war. Um, I think sometimes that manifests with a narcissist and the empath kind of dynamic. Um, because I think the empath definitely has to
Mhm.
like tap
Yep.
in and discover and recognize like you have this inner warrior, you have this inner strength, you're not a victim. These people don't have the right to abuse you, so like you kind of, when you're able to work through that narrative and rise up, you reclaim that inner power. um and I just feel like the external, like right now, obviously there's been so much inflation after COVID. um so we're really navigating a very stressful time in the culture. um we're not meant, as humans, as a species, we're not meant to carry the weight and the burden all on our own. We're not, and to be forced with the financial struggles and burdens and having all these systems that just see us as a resource. I mean, it's kind of like how we see the earth and we tap into her to suck out all her oil.
Mhm,
It feels
mhm.
like these structures that we've created over our own evolutionary period are now just feeding off of us. And for me, that's where I'm like, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to give into this. And that's where I'm tapping into a lot of my inner warrior energy. um because I don't want to keep repeating cycles. Like I don't want to keep giving into these systems. I want them to fall apart. I want them to be restructured. I want new paradigms to emerge. And so that's where my, I guess, inner warrior energy is, where I know how powerful I am. I know my worth. I know my value. I've gotten through all of those, wounds and blocks and all of those things to kind of, again, rise into this sense of self empowerment. And now it's facing the external and being like, I'm not going to live my life this way. Just because I was born into this 9 to 5, wake up and live your life for other things, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
then go home and just kind of zone out, right? Or we find coping mechanisms to kind of escape our reality. Like that doesn't work for me anymore. And it hasn't for years. And I'm not. So like that's where I'm trying to fight off through healing, right? Through awareness and healing and transmuting those darker energies that feels like it is trying to just suck the life force from my soul.
Mhm.
But then I can also see that at a macro level outside in the universe and how that might look like with like planets and stars and stuff. So I know there's just so much that's happening. There's just bigger forces at play that are mirroring and mirroring at smaller levels, and we're just a little fraction of that. And I'm never fully going to grasp it or understand it in this human body. Um, but but
Yeah, I
that's
mean, it
where
is. I think, and there is this constant, like, I mean, we've pegged it as this bad thing for, I think because we rationalize things, we make meaning of things, that we've made certain things bad, and, created this sort of idea of war, of like this, like you said, the shadow, the into the light, and them being part of one, and we see it externally. And I think that a lot of it is like we've made certain things bad, certain things right, and it caused sort of our own kind of suffering that doesn't need to be there. Some of it, I think pain for sure is something that is real, and has to be addressed, right? So if somebody, kicks you in your knee, that's going to hurt, right? That there is this level of suffering, and there is a war in the body, right? Because it's trying to repair itself, it's trying to, reorganize, restructure, itself. And then we see the external thing of this individual attacking. And I think, but we see this happening, like you said, at the macro and the micro, that there's this sort of like battle looks like going on, and we've sort of made it a bad thing. And I think with us rationalizing things, with us thinking about those things, we've created a spiritual war in our own right, in a lot of ways, because we've entrapped ourselves into these narratives. And the narrative being that, like you said, the 9 to 5 narrative, like that literally was a narrative that is actually pretty recent. And I believe we are one of the only countries who, I'm not saying that that's not happening maybe in other places, but we're one of the only countries who has that sort of narrative of the 9 to 5, and not a good work life balance, right? And that's happening in the Western world, but why? Why is it happening? It's happening because somebody created the narrative. They call it the Ford model, basically. Henry Ford created the model of 9 to 5, and he did it because of the manufacturing of cars, and he created that work week, and somehow we've adopted that particular narrative and model. Now, if we look at it, it's become our own entrapment, and it sucks the life out of individuals. So you're absolutely correct that some of these systems are designed to sort of suck the life force out of individuals, and totally suffocate them. And then that causes that internal battle. And if you think about it, it's what happens, and this is just a very vague, probably, explanation, but I think it happens more than not, if people can relate, is, for instance, mom, dad go to work, stuck in this 9 to 5 soul sucking job, come home. The battle that they're dealing with is internal, right? It's an internal battle of having to be at work all day, maybe even a job they don't even particularly care for, and they're stressed. Then they come home, and now they're in war with each other because they can't relax, and they're angry. So who do they take it out on? The people that they are closest to, the people they love. So, then the husband wife maybe are not really getting along and now they're at war with each other. And maybe they have children and now the children are seeing that and then they're agitated and now they're at war with their children. So, and then the children are at war with each other. And so it's just like internal, external happening of like these battles that kind of surface. And it's because we've created our own jail.
Mm.
I mean, we've created our own hell, to be
Absolutely.
honest with you. We're we're chained in our own hell and it caused our own suffering for whatever reason, and we can't break free of it. And I say we as a human species because, could you point the finger? Could you say it's a group of people? Perhaps, but the reality is we humans did this to ourselves,
Mhm.
and we are the answer to our own suffering. And we just can't understand that, but it does take a warrior to step up because guess what? It's gonna be a battle.
Mhm.
And, it's funny too because the battle's not only battling the systems, it's battling people's comfortability as well. Because
Yes.
people don't like change.
Right, absolutely. Oh my god, we've talked about that so much. Get out of your comfort zone. And
They'll fight
vulnerability.
you.
Nobody wants to
You
feel
wanna
vulnerable.
you wanna go to war with somebody, just make them uncomfortable. They will go to war with you very quickly.
Oh, man. But no, you're definitely right. Like maybe the assembly line production, or that part of industrialization. I mean, it served a purpose, right? It helped us evolve and get where we are now, but now we're just living a life of consuming material products. And it doesn't stop. It just doesn't stop.
Mhm.
You wake up and you go to sleep, and like it plays out while you're sleeping and like it plays out while you're awake and it just never ends. And at some point, and it's not sustainable. Like,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? To expect, well, oh, I'll get a vacation. Maybe I'll get 2 weeks. I'll get 2 weeks a year. Like that's not enough. Um, Even kids, like I feel so bad. My youngest son, this is about to be his last year in elementary school, and I feel so bad for him because he'll be 11 during this school year, and then he'll go and he'll start, next year at this time he'll start junior high, and that's it. He's got to then start waking up at 6 a.m. They don't get recess, they don't get a playground, and so like I feel so bad and I just kind of want to freeze, my baby and let him have his innocence and his childhood as much as he can. And it's like this bittersweet feeling now that, he's going into fifth grade because it feels like the beginning of an end for him. And that
Mm.
truly breaks my heart because like why are we forcing the children to get up and get on a bus at 6:30 in the morning? It doesn't even add up with our job schedules, like we're not even in sync in any way with like school and work and then driving. Like I think when you get on the road and you look around at the collective energy, like we can't even drive in harmony. It just shows you how out of alignment we are as a collective. And I think like it all shows up when people are driving, all that, the anger, the frustration, like I've got to speed, I've got to get there, everybody's just flying and flying. And I think that's a great metaphor for like how you're tackling your life. Look at how you're driving.
Yep.
Because you know what I mean? Like if you can't even slow down and just enjoy the drive, it's just well, not destiny, but destination, and nothing in between. And like, you got to flip off this person and drive around that person. You know what I mean? Like that is showing your own internal battle coming up. So it's all around us. The signs are in our face every day, but it's just having those blinders on and having tunnel vision and only seeing and accepting and acknowledging like what we want to. Um, but it's not a sustainable. And I feel bad for my kids because like looking at the state of the economy, like how are they going to make it? How are they going to, you know what I mean? Like how is it going to be for them in 10, 15 years? because they're not upping what we make an hour. You know what I mean? They're not giving us more benefits. They're just draining and draining and draining us for more of our resources. And it's not
Absolutely.
sustainable. And I will fight it. I don't know how. I don't know. Like I'm working through it every day. But on a soul level, like I'm not caving.
Yeah, I think that's the gist of it, is that they're stripping the soul
Mhm.
completely to the bare bones because, it's funny because okay, so sort of reading into consciousness, and I really need to remember who's saying what on these things. Sometimes I'm like, wait, who? But there is this model like where they really do like they're trying to understand why we have experience for one, and that why we can self-report our experience. Like that is like the biggest um, I would say headache that scientists have because they don't understand consciousness. They don't know what it is. They can't answer the question. But they talk about, this model of like, okay, so there's input, there's this internal process, and then there's output, and how do they control it, I think is the biggest thing. And in my mind is like, well, why do they want to know so badly? What is their reasoning behind wanting to capture the essence of what it means to be human, what it means to be a self-reported system, to be rational, to think about things, to create from our own imagination, all of these things. And the biggest thing is that they can't understand, the input is different. So for instance, like the input of you're thirsty or whatever, that's kind of like the external thing, right? Where you're like, okay, I'm thirsty, then this internal thing happens where you're like, okay, I feel thirsty, I need a drink, and then the external thing would be then to take a drink, right? So it's kind of like they go through this process, right? And what I'm thinking is that individuals, and I wanna put it, I don't wanna just say it's all capitalism, but I'm gonna say it's capitalism in a lot of ways because capitalism is all about consumption and marketing, right? It's how do we market to individuals? How do we have these individuals consume what it is that we wanna give? So they wanna know behavior, they're trying to control behavior, and I think by controlling behavior, they do specific things, and sometimes it's price gouging or whatever it is that they do, and they're like, we know that if we up the price of this, that, because it's maybe gas and oil, they have to do that because they know that they need to get somewhere. So now we can control kind of the behavior based on, what we think we can do. Um, but there's this thing, the reason I'm going into this whole long narrative is because there's this thing that they don't account for. I call it the trickster archetype, but it also could be the warrior archetype, is that they're not counting on us fighting against it or speaking up against it. And it's because they put us at just comfortable. They put us right at comfortable where we're not going to go crazy. But I think right now what's happening collectively is that they're putting us in such an uncomfortable situation that people have no choice but to fight. They have no choice but to emerge this warrior spirit. So, it is timely that we're talking about it, that we're saying, hey, we need to emerge as warriors, because it is an internal battle. They're sucking our soul, for one, with the 9 to 5, no time to process. We have, if people do, and I'm going to say I'm in a totally different circumstance. I'm very fortunate, but for individuals that don't have time abundance and are having lack of time, they have no time to reflect on the battle that's being waged against them. They have no time to sit there and realize that there is a spiritual war that's happening in their 2 days that they have off from work. what are they doing? They're probably so tired that they can't do anything, to be quite honest with you. They just wanna relax. They have no time to reflect and stop and pause and really assess what is happening at the macro level. They're so caught up in this micro level day-to-day activity. I have to pay the bills. I have to do this, that they're not realizing that what's being sucked from them is, I would say, their soul, but also their time. Because I would say that the soul is sort of like, we embody a soul to experience time. I think, I could say that that's probably correct in a lot of ways, that we experience things in time, and our currency, our major currency is time itself, and we're being suffocated and starved of time.
Absolutely.
So, and we're looking at the money. We're not looking at the time.
Right.
And there's a good movie. I've talked about time so much. Time is such a big thing for me because people are trapped in time loop.
Yeah.
They're, I've told you this before. This
Yeah.
is why I don't follow. I believe in astrology, and I like astrology and time, but I don't follow it because I believe it keeps you trapped in time. And
Right.
and I think there's a way to transcend that, right? So that you're not stuck in these constructs of somebody else's time, if
Absolutely.
that makes sense. So, not that I don't believe it, and not that I don't follow it or read it, but I'm not stuck to it.
Right.
I don't remember dates. I don't remember all that stuff.
Yeah.
I just don't.
We talked about, yeah, no, we talked a lot about that, like personally, just between you and I back in
Yep.
like February, March, and because I was the astrology.
You
Like
are, you
I mean, I
are.
still am, but
Yeah, you're the time person.
but I've let go in a lot of ways.
Yep.
I'm
Yep.
not tracking what's happening every day, but yet I can feel it and I can understand.
Uh-huh. Correct.
But I was laughing when you were talking about the weekend and being too tired because that's been my life. And
Mhm.
like I haven't mowed my lawn and I have
Mm.
put it off for like the past like I mean since Saturday. My goal is Saturday and we're on Wednesday.
Yeah.
um because it takes me like an hour and a half. I have to do the push mower around my house and then I got to get on the rider and I got to go further out into the property. And I got to go to the gas station because I'm out of gas right now. So I got to fill up the gas can. And I'm just like, I don't want to do it. Like I'm a single mom and I've got my two youngest that I'm raising, at 14 and 10, and I'm tired. Like I'm
Mhm.
exhausted, like having all of the things, all the responsibilities, the weight of it all on my shoulders. Like it is too much. And then I got to balance it the best that I can. And so some of those things like I just don't care about anymore. It's like I just have to let it go. Otherwise, what's it going to cause? It's going to cause stress. It's going to cause
Mhm.
me to like start being a negative criticism, critic in the mind of beating myself up, thinking I'm not good enough. and
Yep.
and no, like I've already navigated and gotten past all that, right? Kind of rewiring the nervous system. You got to rewire the brain too, right?
Yep.
So like I'm not falling back into any of those unhealthy things. But for so many people, they're never able to heal and rewire themselves and break out of those perspectives. So, like
Mhm.
you said, it's just this loop and this loop and this loop.
Mhm.
But yeah, and the astrology was very intense for August.
Mhm.
There has been a lot going on and we're about to enter eclipse season, and that will shake things up more in September and October. It is meant, to kind of align us with destiny. So those astrological circumstances have massive importance. um and I think just noticing it and accepting it is enough to kind of surrender, and you
Mhm.
don't have to get carried away and like live by it, you know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Mhm.
I don't have
Mhm.
to worry about like living my day because of this alignment. We actually had a rare planetary alignment this morning. I think it was like
Mhm.
5 or 6 planets right at
Mhm.
sunrise.
Mhm.
um but I can know like that energy is just gonna ripple out. And then, you know what I mean? It's gonna impact me on a personal level through my experiences in whatever way it's meant to. And it's gonna be different for other people. But at least having an awareness of those planets' personalities, because they're archetypes in themselves, you
Correct.
know, I think some of that can be helpful. Um, but yeah, the whole time and time itself on a universal perspective, it feels like it's speeding up. You know, even reflecting back at this summer, I mean, this summer feels like it's flown by. Things that happened 3 weeks ago feels like 3 months ago. You know,
Mhm.
looking back at February and having those conversations we did, that already feels like 2 years ago to me. Like, oh
Yeah.
no, that was just February when I went and flew and, you know, got to see you and hang out with you. And we had some beautiful breakthroughs by our union. So time is in a very weird phase for us
Mhm.
humans to navigate. And
Mhm.
it does feel like we don't have time to do all of the responsibilities
Mhm.
and then try and live, like actually genuinely just live from a state of joy.
Mhm. That's right.
Yeah.
So if we saw time, even time itself is an archetype, right? If you really think about it, it's like we are experiencing, I mean, I can't stress that enough. If I mean, if anything, if you can liberate yourself from the chains of clock time. You know, there's different ways we measure time, and I do a time currency, and I probably should just do a time currency workshop. You know what I mean? I think that, maybe I'll do that because it's already laid out, it's already set up. And time currency is the only currency that I believe is important in this world because we look at monetary currency, right? We look at money as currency, and we've sort of traded our time currency for this paper currency, fiat, money, and that's what we've done. And so if you look at people and how they use their time, well, if you looked at the wealthy, how much time are they really committing to the fiat? They're not. They're not. The money comes into them, right? And their time is liberated. But it's not because they got the money that their time was liberated. They liberated their time and then they got the money. It's a totally different way of seeing the world. That your time is your abundance. That is the core of the abundance of what we have. That is the only currency. And if you notice, even when I do my workshops and stuff like that, if you notice, we talk about time more than we even realize. I mean, to me, this is the most important archetype.
Absolutely.
At the end of our time, right? And one of my friends, I like the way that he always put it. He said, you have when on your tombstone, you have the date you were born, then you have this slash and the date that you were gone. And that slash is the time we experience in between those 2 dates. The journey that we take in between that slash, between the 2 dates of when we are born and when we die. And there's that journey that's in between. And in that journey, which is such a short amount of time in, cosmic time, if we think about it, or planetary time, or whatever, if we looked at it, we only live, I want to say, a microscopic point of time. It's such it feels like it's a long time, but it's not. 100 years, if people live that long, we'll just say because the life expectancy is a lot lower, but we'll say 100. If you live 100 years of life, that is just the tiniest piece that we get to live in time and experience. And I always say, so what is it that we're doing within that slash, that journey that comes between? And I can guarantee you, and I know this, that when people are typically in their deathbed and laying there, some people who have not honored their time or used it wisely will say, I wished I would have done the things that, I wanted to do. I would have done it differently. There's this sort of regret that sort of comes up because they didn't feel like they used their time wisely or the way that it should have been used. And so we have the choice. And I think when we talk about this warrior, this individual to rise, really what we're doing is we're fighting for, yes, our soul, but also for our time, our experience, our liberation, for how we want to experience the world around us, how we want to engage with it, interconnect with it, what kind of experiences we want to have, because that's what it is. It's a compilation of experiences at the end of the day. And what we do with it is really important. So if you can figure out time, and I'm very excited because um in my one of my class in consciousness and experience, the class that I'm taking, um one of the days that I'm going to be facilitating class is about consciousness and time, and I'm very excited about that.
Mm. Yeah, it's cool.
Super excited to get to see what they say about time, because I have this thing with, this, that I have this thing with
Mm.
time. We've talked about it many times. See, many times. I'm telling you, notice your language today and realize, like, for listeners,
Mm.
mark how many times you talk about time.
Right.
Many times you talk
Right, or
about
you're checking the clock to see the time because you gotta live by the clock and you gotta be
yeah,
here. You have that appointment
everything's
then.
around time.
Yeah,
It's everything, because it's
yeah,
like, I gotta go, I have this appointment, that's about time.
right.
Or, "Oh, I'm spending the day." When you say you're spending, what are you spending? Even look at the language,
Mhm,
right? It's almost like I'm spending money. So if you looked at currency, they've sort of attached currency to this concept of kinda time, right?
mhm.
I'm spending, or we attached our language to currency of money. Could be the other way around, I'm not 100% sure, but we're like, "I'm spending the day with," "I'm spending time with," right? And if you looked at it from the money perspective, like, change it out, really think about it, right? Or you can say, I'm spending or I'm paying attention to. What am I paying attention to? Oh, I'm watching this or I'm watching that. You can say that you're paying something out, right? You're paying this and you're paying that, and you're spending this and you're spending that. And our language even tells you that. So time is a currency, and we can ride the wave. And I always tell people, when you liberate yourself from this Ford model, which is really, I think there should be some legislation around this, because if we went back historically and looked at when they said, hey, this is a good idea to have a 9 to 5, which I don't even know if it's part of legislation, but to break out of it would be to, hey, we don't agree with this anymore, this model needs to go. Like, who created that to begin with? It was this guy named Henry Ford. He created that model. So we don't want it anymore. It doesn't serve us. It doesn't work for us. You know what I mean? And that's where the warrior archetype sort of shows up too, because we've got to battle these things. We've got to be able to um, put on our warrior shield and be like, let's go to battle, and there's that. So, and then also you had brought up another point that I just kind of want to touch on real quick too, is, the empath and the narcissist, or the empath and the psychopath, the empath and the sociopath. That when you think about it, I think I would like to say that people are more empathic than they are, psychotic, or I shouldn't even say psychotic, narcissistic or sociopathic or pathic. It's a very small amount of people. I think really at heart, people are good and want to do good. Um, However, if you look at the way that the world is sort of structured, right? If you look at the one percenters, if you look at the people that are in power, they're typically narcissistic, sociopathic, or psychopathic, and they're feeding off of people that are too scared to rise up and battle those individuals. And that is the problem. It's because we're too empathic, we're too this. We have we at what point does a society get to where, because civil war may break out, that we're raging a war of the soul, where eventually the soul says, "Hell no, you don't get my soul anymore. This is mine."
Absolutely.
Now, where are we gonna stand up and fight back?
Right. And we've seen it in the past. Like, you know what I
Oh, we don't
mean?
get there.
Like for
Mhm.
sure the 60s, anytime there was any kind of revolution, right?
Yep,
And that's where again, like the I don't know, the shadow side of the darker, forces that have then become this structure, right? That are navigating it. Um yeah, it doesn't want to let go. It doesn't want to. And now I feel like our police, they're just militarizing.
mhm.
So if we do go into protest, you know what I mean? It's like, no, we'll shut that down instantly. So we don't even get the right to protest like there was in the 50s and 60s. Um, yeah, so it just seems like those things are against us because it knows the power of the collective when it does go into the warrior.
Exactly. So I would say it's like, how do we find liberation? And there's so many strategies, because it's like the art of war, I think is for anybody who's aware should read that, because the reality is, and this is why, of course, I'm going to bring in Kung Fu on this one, because when you look at the like Chinese, right, and kind of their ideals and maybe philosophy, and I'm not going to claim to know it fully, but I can say that when it comes to the art of war, you want your you want the people that you're going to battle with to actually come into submission without ever raising the sword. So you want them to surrender without having to actually shed blood. And that might become a long game, you know what I mean? And I have my own theories about why China is the way China is, and how we've become consumers of their products and stuff like that, because the war, I think, that we're they're waging against us is not with military force, but with our pockets and with our need to consume, which is another thing that you brought up earlier. We are a consumer-based society. And it's funny because I remember taking economics. This is a long time ago, man. That guy was he was a wild, crazy one. He was kind of not. He was a mean man. We'll just say that, because he said, "Well, you guys are watching The Simpsons," and then he went like pounded his fist. He's like, "The world is going." And I was like, "Whoa, you're a little bit too passionate about this, bro." And I was like, and first of all, I don't watch The Simpsons, but then I'm like, maybe I should, because now they predict the future. Anyway, just kidding. But he said something that was funny. He's like, "Well, you're buying cheap China shit. They're taking over our economy." And he just like puts his fist down, and I was all, "Whoa!"
Yeah, I
And
can
I
remember
was
a
like,
time
"Oh my."
period when I was in retail where I don't remember, it had to have been after 9/11. Um, yeah, absolutely it was. But yeah, people were like boycotting
Uh-huh.
the China made products and stuff like that for like a minute, and then
Yeah,
it just goes back to normal, back to
yeah,
consuming.
yeah. Well, and because they know us,
Yeah.
that's the art of war, is like, know your enemy better than you know yourself.
Mm.
And so they know.
But it
And
makes
my thing.
sense.
Yeah,
That
go ahead.
fear tactic, right? And it
Uh-huh.
almost makes you think when you think of some of like the old like families, right? The nuclear kind of family system where the father, the patriarchy, worked, right? And everyone else just either went to school or the wife, was kind of had to stay home, right? And it was like his word was the word. And
Mm,
it's like you could put fear into your child
mm,
just by
mm,
making these
mm,
threats, and you knew like
mm,
everyone would fall in line to you because like
mm,
you ruled the family.
mm,
And
mm.
I think like that's fallen away. We don't have that so much in that system, but intergenerational trauma it
Do you
gets
know my
passed
dad?
along. And so
You
you
just
see people today that feel like they have no control and the
described.
kids don't want to listen, and so it's like, well, if I can make people fear me, there's that sense of empowerment internally. And then, and so like, yeah, it's all just chaos. It really is chaos.
I
Like,
just think I'm like, "Do you know my father? Because what you explained is exactly my father. I'm the word." I'm like, "Okay."
right. Well, women are
I
like
think
that too, for sure.
let
I
me
don't want to
just
say
say
just men, because there are women that are able to emasculate men very well and very easily, unfortunately, too. So,
well, there's a both and yeah, and I think
right.
but I'm just, from my perspective, my dad was the typical, I am the word,
Mm,
um I am the mayor, which is like I am the head of the household. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't fly for me, first of all. Um,
exactly.
you know what I'm saying? So, but I think that there was some good, like the discipline part of it was good. Like I think children, we need this healthy balance because the discipline was, I like discipline. I actually enjoyed discipline, to be honest with you, and there were a lot of things that I liked about it. But when people are spewing, I am the word, and you do as I tell you to do. Like I remember my dad, don't do as I do, do as I tell you to do mentality. I'm like, yeah, no, that ain't gonna work for me.
Mm,
Like you get to be the example, first of all. And if you are not being the example, then you have no right to tell me what to do. That was my thought process, as a kid. So I was like, yeah, no, that's not going to work out very well. This is not going to work, Of course, I never told him that because he was you would think he was military. He was very, like, not very nice guy, period. So, I just kept my mouth shut for sure. But um, that was his whole energy. That's just the way he was. He was like that old, I am the word, I am the way, and that's that. And it was like, whoa, like that's a little too over the top for me, and a little melodramatic. It's like, calm down, first of
right.
all. You're here, and I just need you to be like here. Um,
But that's
but
where you could at least be defiant and break the cycles.
Oh, for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, I don't have children, but, I think with my nieces and nephews, that was the closest I ever got to be able to experience kind of what it would be to be a parent.
Mm,
But I think you know, with the way he was, I think it's good to have discipline. And I see this with the children,
mm,
is that there's this good balance between the 2, and we definitely need more discipline. And again, here we go with this battle of the soul, of fighting for the soul, where now, and I just totally do not agree with this. I don't care what any of my viewers think or whatever they hear, because, and this is totally an opinion of mine for sure. I do not agree with the schools letting the child, um kind of take the narrative about identity and all that kind of stuff. I think that is totally has misstepped, the ability for parents to raise their children. It is not the job of an institution to tell, how a student or child should be disciplined, or what happens in their home. Like, I think that that's just crazy, you know what I mean? So I think, like, where public schools are going, some of them are just kind of, I think it's weird, because, if I was a parent, I wouldn't want some intermediary coming in and saying, "No, we know what's best for your child." No, you don't. First
mm,
of all, you don't know the history of the family. You don't know the way that the mind thinks, and these
mm.
DNA that's getting passed down. Do you know what I mean?
Right. No, I do.
So you
Even the
just don't
astrology,
know.
like that's where I will bring in the astrology. Like
Mhm.
I literally sent my one of my my son's teacher a couple years ago, because they just want to label him a behavior kid. He's argumentative. No, he's a Libra. Okay, he doesn't
Mhm.
feel justified, so he's going
Right.
to defend himself. And I told her that. I was like, you just don't understand his psychology, and
Right.
you want to label him, and he's not okay with that, and I'm not okay with that.
Sure.
Because like you're right. I mean, I had another child where they're like, "Oh, ADD, ADHD," put him on medication,
Mhm.
and like, who are you to tell me to like, you know what I mean? It was just because you got 20 kids in your class, and you know what I mean? Like, and you don't want to deal with like his personality and his behavior, and I get that, but I've seen as a teacher in the high school, years ago, I remember having a student who I would say had behavioral. I mean, I taught alternative ed. This was kids with social and emotional and some dysfunctional, they were targeted dropouts, and a lot of them did drop out. And I watched this kid go from being like energetic and not maybe making the best decisions with that energy, to getting on medication, and that kid just became a zombie at the desk.
Mhm.
He was just
Yep.
like he was just not even normal, like a normal, you know what I mean, energy anymore. It was just this shell of a body.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so, like,
Yep.
how did that help him? He wasn't engaging any better. If anything, he was more, and that was his own family, that medicated him or whatnot, their choices. Um, but just seeing all of that, and having that experience from the parent perspective and then the teacher perspective, like, I do agree with you. There is a lot there that is not in alignment. And then even as a school teacher, like, you are a mandatory reporter. But my school system that I was at, they didn't never go with that. They didn't acknowledge the things that they saw and report things, and I know a lot of schools don't. um yeah, and I've talked to you obviously on here about even some of like that elementary school that was kindergarten to second graders, where they have a closet, like a little side room, 8 by 10 kind of padded room, where, oh, the kid's having another meltdown and freaking out. These kids are clearly in homes of trauma. You don't come into school at 8 years old behaving in that much of aggressive, violent, language and physical body energy if you're not witnessing that at home and around that.
Mhm.
and,
Mhm.
and then you're
Mhm.
causing more trauma because you're like shoving them into this space to deal with their outburst, because they're like attacking you.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So there's so much just wrong, and ignored and misunderstood, from the home to the school level, because
Mhm.
it's just become glorified daycare. So parents can work, and all you're doing is conditioning the child so that they can go and sit down and shut up and do what they're told by their boss.
Exactly.
you
It's
know?
it's control it's controlling behavior.
Yeah.
That's the end game is they wanna control behavior,
Right.
and 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 that is the problem, and this'll go to a whole other thing, which we're running out of time, but even in my readings, right? So, talking about, artificial intelligence and, them trying in consciousness studies, really trying to understand what is experience and why do we experience basically, and how do we create, and that's what I feel like they're trying to do with artificial. How do we create a self-reported system that has consciousness or awareness, or can report or have feeling and experience? And I'm asking why, in my opinion, because I'm like, well, what is it that they're trying to do? Like, what is the end goal? Why is it that they're so interested? And I have my theories about why. Like, there's a couple of theories that I have, but one of them and I think this one is probably true, is that they wanna control. I mean, I'll just put it like that. They just wanna have control. And they wanna understand how to control a thing so that they can get the outcome that they want. If I can control this, I will get the outcome that I want. And they've had to do a lot of, if you look historically, when they brought slaves over and stuff like that, they couldn't necessarily control behavior fully. If they could, we there would still be slaves, and there's not, because they couldn't control humans. You can't control humans. They just can't control behavior. And it really, it bothers them. And so now we have a course in psychology, you're trying to figure out like, oh, well, what is it? So they have all these labels to try to say, okay, well, if we can't control behavior, we can control the assignment we give them, right? The box we're going to put them in. So you have this like split of like neuronormative and then neurodivergent. And then you have these long list of things that are someone's on the spectrum, or they're on the this, or it's this, or they have this, or they have, so we're putting all these labels. And for what? Usually it's so that they can put them back into this box of control. And it's like, you can't. Humans don't operate like that. We don't operate in a box. You know what I mean? We're very
Mhm.
flexible, we're open, and we're unique, and we have our own experiences. And so it's very difficult to say, I can control the human population. For the most part, they
Mm,
can kind of control,
yeah.
but they can't. You can,
But
I
it's all
don't care.
ego based because
And
the
you can't.
ego needs to feel safe in survival mode with where it can control its environment. So that's what it's just coming from, is stemming of basic, the way we were wired to have human experience, but yeah.
It's
It's
it's control. It all boy to me, I'm like, "You guys just wanna control behavior."
yeah.
That's what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And you wanna control behavior, but to what means? What is it that you're trying to, for what? What are you trying to get out of it? Well,
Mm,
they're trying to get slave labor. You know
mhm,
what I mean? And they're trying to get us to bend to their will. And
mm.
by they, whoever the they are, right?
Systems,
It's
yeah.
yeah, the systems, or the people who are creating the systems,
Mm,
the individuals who get together who, are have agendas about how they want the population to move. You know
mm.
what I mean? Which they do. They have these
Oh,
dialogues
absolutely.
about that.
We
And
wouldn't have politics.
exactly.
There
And
wouldn't be
so
political parties if there wasn't someone trying to be in control of all the
correct.
decisions and right.
Yep. And so no, and it is hard. It's hard because that's the way it is. And so
Yeah.
they're wanting to control, and and so that's my one theory. There's other theories I have in terms of like, typically it's men that are creating these artificial intelligence, and I believe a lot of it has to do with the fact that they themselves can't grow birth inside of them, and so they can't really
Mm.
create. I mean, I guess they're part of the creation, right? Because they're sperm or whatever, you need that, but beyond that, they don't have the ability to grow life within them.
Right.
And I think mhm,
Yeah. No, I was gonna say, if you're always distracted on the external too, and you never slow down and go into stillness and self reflection and self analysis, you know what I mean? You're never gonna discover like the patterns, the wounds, the things about you, like situations are coming up to trigger, your awareness. It's not just happening to you, it's happening for you. And,
mhm.
and I think there's a huge part of the collective that are just not doing the internal work. They're just completely shut off and void of their own internal. So when emotions and thoughts come up, they just ride those waves and get carried away. You have to step back from that and become an observer. You can't be attached. You're
Well,
not
and
your
they
emotions.
are,
You're not your thoughts.
right. But
And
they are, and that's the thing, is that they are observing, but there's observing externally.
right,
And
exactly.
I so
Yeah.
yeah. So and then I think that that's why they're creating. that is my theory. I honestly think that that's why they're trying to create artificial intelligence. I think that I think it's one of my theories. I'm not saying it's true because I don't know. Some research would have to be done that they don't have the ability to produce life.
Mm,
And I think that what has happened because we live in such a patriarchal world is that their natural response to that is to create artificial intelligence
mm,
and try to control the behavior of that thing. You
mm,
know what I mean? So it
mhm.
becomes their own kind of baby, if you will.
Right.
Um, that's another kind of, theory that I have around it. And so it's just this thing that we're trying to create or to move forward with and to understand instead of actually embodying it ourselves. And
Mm,
and like you said, looking, observing, being the internal observer of your own internal world,
mm,
which is where there is a battle and battles that you'll have to overcome, but that is,
right.
you can give birth to things, ideas and stuff like that, um,
Absolutely.
within you, you
Right.
know, but it's kind of turned into this thing of I want to control behavior, which is
Yeah.
just, yeah. So anywho, um, I know this kind of podcast went all over the place, which is good. It's like, because
No, I think
exploring
it's
how,
all connected.
of course I do too, but it's still for some, I'd be like, this is all over the place, but it is
Right.
connected to me in my brain. I can connect it all.
Right.
But it is exploring the archetypes, you know, be
Yes.
it the warrior, be it the shadow, be it the time, be it,
Right.
the
Trickster. Yeah.
trickster, the control, the empath, the narcissist.
Right. Absolutely. Those are all situations or narratives or internal. I think the biggest thing is honestly like we're talking about the experience part and kind of what you're going back to like science doesn't include our internal experience, and it just looks at that external experience in a way. um and even with like psychology, right, you can look at, there's a lot of behavioral psychology and cognitive, you know what I mean, those types of things. But the soul, even, the study of the soul is what psychology means, and yet we don't even have the conscious entity of that in mainstream psychology today. To find a spiritual therapist, especially where I live, like there's nobody in that field. And I have thought about going down that road. And this is where I struggle because, like, with our degree and everything, right? We're kind of on that path. And some people did go into clinical psychology. And, like, I don't want to. I don't want to diagnose people. I don't want to deal with, the insurance companies telling me I have to give a diagnosis to give a medication to be able to have a client. Um, but I think like we really need to we really need to respect and honor and bear witness to the experience internally of the soul. And it is a battle. I mean, many times I feel like Jekyll and Hyde within, because it's the ego, it's the soul, it's the subconscious. There's just so many split aspects that are trying to reintegrate. And so when they're all split from each other, there's going to be internal chaos. But once you start integrating those aspects, and once you start acknowledging them and listening to them, and recognizing this is part of the experience and the journey, then you're not run by emotions. Your brain isn't in monkey mind mentality. You're not impacted on your nervous system where everything is fight or flight or freeze mode. So it's possible to reintegrate and rewire and to live in peace and harmony, like you said. But things are still going to come up that go deeper in the roots, right? Because the work never truly ends. We need to continue evolving. And that's what it really truly is at the end of the day. It's like, how much was I able to evolve? How much was I able to transcend old narratives and grow? How much skin did I shed? You know, and if you're not, if you're in a container, if you're in a comfort zone and you're just feeling like pressure squeezing at you, but you're not changing anything, you know, that's where it does become a internal war that can have bigger repercussions for sure, that, you know,
Yeah,
mirror into the external back at you.
yeah, and I'm starting to understand why, well, first from a scientific perspective, why it's not there is this kind of, so in consciousness studies, right? And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. And maybe next time I'll do more of like this um explanation of like what is happening in consciousness with the split of mind body, consciousness studies from obviously from the scientific perspective and reductionist, right? They have like functionalist or dualist functionalism.
Yeah.
um they have like these different ways of looking at it, and the reason that they can't really put it into a scientific method is because they can't reduce it, because they
Right.
can't really capture it. They don't they're how do you capture soul? How do you capture
Right.
experience? How do
Still
you
looking at the
capture
material.
how do you
Yeah.
capture, you
Mm,
can't do that from necessarily a scientific perspective, but you do have qualitative research that,
right.
ways that you can do like narrative psychology or different ways
Right.
of looking, at it. And so there are different methodologies that you can,
Absolutely.
but
That's
it
how I
becomes,
embraced my thesis.
yeah,
Was,
so
yeah, so that was beautiful to be able to have that at least experience.
exactly.
Mm,
So you do it from your, experience, but it's not something that can be captured.
mm,
So it's not gonna. I don't know that they'll ever. They're trying to find. Like I'm reading about the what is it? What can I phenomenology,
no.
neurophenomenology, where they're trying to bridge the gap between neuroscience and phenomenology, and how the
Mm,
two can come together, and how would you do sort of research around that, where
mm,
you would take the brain activity, which would be the scientific, and then the self-reports of the qualitative, and
mm,
bridge the gap between the 2. But are they gonna do it? I don't know. So those are things that, like, of
mm,
course, I'm learning, right, in my coursework, which is been very, very, powerful and
mm,
impactful. And so I think it's important to for people to understand these concepts,
right,
um, from a more academic perspective. We get it from the individuals. Like at the end of the day, it's like, what are we talking about? How can you deny? I don't under my biggest thing, and I'll just say this before we go because it's been well over an hour, is I don't understand how these individuals who reduce things, right? The reductionists who use scientific method discredit experience.
right.
I'm like, if I slap you right now, are you gonna feel that or not? Like, I'm pretty sure you're gonna feel it. I'm pretty sure you're gonna feel it. I'm pretty sure you had an experience. You know what I mean? You can't deny
Right,
that, right?
right.
So
And then it
so
causes a whole internal internal
exactly. So
experience.
so how in the hell are you gonna tell me that this doesn't exist? Like,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
okay, something is wrong with you.
That's where
Seriously.
science needs to evolve past, like you said, that reduction, that mechanism,
Oh, yeah.
worldview that's so outdated. And I think like that's where evolution is taking us. It's taking us to a holistic, integral, you know, approach. So
Yeah.
hopefully we can make new discoveries and have new theories, and then that can take hold and seed and plant right into the collective.
I
Um,
think, well, it is,
yeah,
and I can say that, I'm very the program that I'm in, um, is really known for their qualitative research.
yeah,
So, I think that doing these, qualitative methods, I think, and understanding what's going out there. So, bringing more of the academic to the people so that they understand, because they sort of throw these terms out there and
right,
not really sure of where they derived from. There was a
right,
list of questions in one of the articles that, was like, we do take a dualist perspective, regardless if we think we want to or not, because the narratives that we're actually getting. So when the narratives finally trickle down to the masses, right? People think they understand it, but they don't really understand the theoretical frameworks and all that it came from. So they don't really, they know part of it, but they're not really ingrained in understanding really what the individual was saying with this particular concept or whatever it is. And then the way that the masses start to think really is a construct of what a professor was writing about in an article that then trickled down to the masses. And so our whole frame becomes, our whole narrative and frame of thinking comes from people we don't even know and concepts we don't even
Mm,
understand. And we think we do.
right.
And we think we're in control of the narrative, but we're not.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it was when you ask these questions, it's like, and then at the end, he's like, if you answered yes to any of these questions, you have some form of dualist. And most people would answer these questions yes, because it
Mm,
seems like that. But when you get deeper into the information, you're like, wait, but what about this? And then understanding the frame that it's coming from too.
mm,
Because, it's just, as you go deeper and deeper and deeper, you start to say, okay, now I understand why this concept arose from this. Do I truly believe that? And the answer would be even no. So
mm.
people are going on believing things that they don't even know where it derived from. They don't
Right.
know the true core of what that particular theory was trying to say. But they'll accept the end product, and they don't even know how it unpacked to that end product. Do you see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it's interesting, and even myself questioning, like, wow, you know, what approach would I take? Which way would I go? What direction? And do I have these ideas of dualists? Well, yeah, I do. Um, and then further going on, and then how can I contribute in a way that could bridge the gap, perhaps, if there is a way to bridge the gap.
Mm,
Um, but maybe not, you know what I mean?
right.
They're just you can never, in my mind, you can never truly answer how. You can answer why, maybe, and there would not be no causation to that why, but how, we'll never know.
Mm,
There is no way we can ever know how consciousness and awareness has emerged.
right.
There's just no way. You would have to understand the constructs of it. It'd have to be material, and it's not.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting. So anyway, sorry, as this go on because I'm like, oh my god, all these
Yeah. Well,
readings, and I'm like,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah, I
um,
get it. No, I would just say like that's where education is power. And
yeah.
look at where education's manipulated or
Oh,
not
for sure.
allowed even, right? I mean, because there are definitely countries in the world where, mostly girls or whatnot, or, maybe can't go to school and things like that. But yeah,
Yeah,
educate books, the banned books, like all those things, right? They just try to keep information from us and think, oh,
correct,
ignorance is bliss. But
correct. So so there you have it. Yeah, so there you have it. It's just a lot of information, and I just totally went off on a tangent because I have a lot going on in my brain about my classes and everything that's coming up. So, have a fantastical day.
Bye.
Love you. Yeah, love you. Mwah. Bye.
Bye.